This episode of The Big 6-0 brought to you by Louie Car Real Estate, helping people in the Hills District find their dream home since 1992. Ready to buy, sell or rent? Check out louiscar.com.au for all your property needs.
If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlinson. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Well, welcome to the Big 6-0. Thanks for joining us. My name's Guy Rawlinson, and if it's your first time here, welcome aboard. If you're back for a return flight, please make sure your seat and tray tables are in the upright position and your seatbelt is securely fastened. We're about to take off on a bit of a journey through some of the catchiest advertising of the 60s, 70s and 80s, and helping me navigate this little slice of turbulence is my co-pilot. What's your name again?
Welcome to Friday, my friend. I'm Kaylee Harris. I mean, I thought you would have known that.
Oh,
I'm somebody of
Kaylee
significant
Harris.
note, remember?
Right on the tip of my tongue. Like some of the words of the TVs and radio and advertising jingles that we grew up with, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. They were such a thing, weren't they? Particularly, I think, in the 70s, advertising jingles really took off.
Yeah, look, that's when they were so catchy and they burrowed into your brain and set up permanent residence there, really. I mean, they've lived rent-free in my head for decades. Probably doesn't say a lot, does it? But they're like little earworms, aren't they? They sort of made us beg our parents for breakfast cereals and chocolate bars and soft drinks and all stuff we didn't need.
Yeah, and you can imagine these advertising executives with a ponytail and an earring, sitting around a boardroom table trying to come up with something. How can we get people to remember the product? Oh, I know, let's create a jingle. When jingles were huge. But it actually goes back before the 70s, doesn't it? There was a couple of really early radio and TV jingles for products.
Yeah, and we're blaming those guys, girls, whoever that actually came up with that because there's some really iconic Australian jingles, aren't there?
Yeah, well, think about Happy Little Vegemites, the kids with the little circles on their cheeks. And, every kid, I think when that came out, I was very young, but it was probably, when would that have come out, in the 50s or the 60s?
No, that's it. It came out in the 50s. I did a little bit of research on it. It was written back in 1954, but it didn't become a big tune in advertising for another 3 or 4 years after that when it was shown on TV. So it had been on radio, but it didn't really become part of that whole thing until sort of years later. So.
And it was rehashed again in the ensuing years. It's been brought back by Kraft quite a few times, the Vegemite jingle. We all wanted to be that little kid, didn't we? That little girl. Well, I did.
Oh.
Why does she get to be in an ad, Mum?
Yeah, well, there are probably days where I wish I was that little girl as well, but that's another story, really, isn't it?
Enough of that.
But predating that, of course, is an even more iconic item. I'm not sure whether it's actually a genuine Australian ad. The aeroplane jelly ad, was that genuinely Australian ad, or?
That's a really good question. I don't know. Maybe someone could write into us and tell us. I don't know, but it was have a listen. I mean, even the recording quality, it's so old fashioned.
I like aeroplane jelly. Aeroplane jelly for me.
I mean, the whole idea of airplanes and jelly. I mean, it's just how did that even become a thing? It makes me think of some horrible stuff that you put on an engine part.
Yeah, look, does it, like, if I'm going up in a plane, do I want that whole wobbling effect, if I'm sitting on a plane? And it was written in the 30s. Can you believe that? I mean, it was...
Oh, really?
It was recorded in the late 30s. And if people think that they get bombarded with advertising these days, it used to go on live radio, and they had the original girl that sang that was a 3-year-old called Jennifer Pikel. And it was played up to 100 times a day on radio.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Wow.
And her mother didn't renew the contract after a couple of years, so there was this massive search to find a new singer. and they came up with the girl that ended up doing the ad that we all know now. And it was a
Yeah.
5-year-old called Joy King, and they recorded the jingle back in
really?
1937. So it's such an old ad, but everyone knows it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I've been played 100 times a day. I'm not surprised it's been stuck in our heads for so long. But let's come forward a little bit to the 70s. Now, as we discussed this before, the 70s were a little bit naughty in terms of music and things like that. And I'm thinking of the Ripper 76 album covers with cheeky bottoms and stuff like that. So it was a little bit more cheeky. And the push bike song, do you remember that? The cameraman following a girl down the road, and the mixtures. Yeah. The reason I mention it, because do you remember the Razzmatazz stocking ads?
Oh, from the Mixtures. Was it the Mixtures song? Yeah.
I mean, sexualizing women in stockings. It was, I don't know that you'd get away with that these days. It was, it was such a great, catchy,
Could I not
cheeky
remember the
little
Razzmatazz
jingle,
stocking ads?
And I hate to say it because I'm not politically correct at all, but would you still hear something or see something like that these days?
100% not. Because there were pictures. Even my mind now goes back to guys in hard hats coming up through manholes, and looking at this woman walking along with the skirt flowing up and, the Razzmatazz sort of stockings on.
Yeah.
And, the guy mowing the lawn and going straight underneath the sprinkler, all those sort of things. I mean, I didn't know whether that was sexualizing the product or just showing that men were just dumb. Yeah. I don't know which one it was. Because it certainly probably did both.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because these days I heard an ad on the radio yesterday for men to not sexualize women on the street. It's a government ad, I think, and it talks about don't whistle. It's not flattery if you're whistling or staring at a woman in the street. And it's just come completely full circle from those days, as you said, with, tradies and guys on building sites wolf whistling at girls. And I don't know, part of me thinks it's a bad thing. Part of me think, it's probably a good thing. Not a lot of girls would have maybe appreciated it. It was a bit intimidating with 10 blokes staring at you as you walk down the street. So it's probably a good thing.
Oh, Razzmatazz. Oh, Razzmatazz. Razzmatazz. Oh, Razzmatazz. Oh, Razzmatazz. Oh, Razzmatazz. Oh.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely it's a good thing. And as a father of daughters, I appreciate the fact that, times and all those sort of things have changed for the better, for the most part. And I want to have a little bit of a hyperloop in logic here because we're talking about that sort of thing. Do you remember the Tab Cola commercial with a young Elle Macpherson walking along the beach?
Oh, I remember Tab. I don't remember the ad.
Oh, it was good for beautiful people and only 2 calories. And there's Elle walking along and a bloke sitting on the beach next to his wife, partner, girlfriend, and she gives him a clip over the ear because he's checking her out. But once again, are you allowed to do that on TV these days, and sexualise that whole soft drink sort of culture?
It was the 70s, right? I think Tab was the first low sugar soft drink that came on the market.
Yeah, let alone telling people that it's only for beautiful people. I mean, what about the rest of us? I mean,
well, that's right. What the rest of us drink.
Maybe that was the selling point. I mean, we all went and bought Tab and we thought we were going to look like Elle Macpherson or,
Yeah.
So.
Look, speaking of Elle Macpherson, I want to go back to take you back a little bit more. This was the 70s. So back in the 70s, KFC had an ad. It was a jingle, and it was a cartoon ad on TV of a family going down a road in a little, sort of oversized car with 2 fat kids in the back. And it stops at KFC. Now, I know you know the words to it. We're going to play a little bit of it in a second, but give us a little bit of Hugo and...
Well, Hugo said you go, and I said no, you go, and soon we were. Yeah, I mean,
you go.
that was. I didn't do my research on this one, but I understand that was written by a Kiwi, and it went so well in Australia that they aired it over in New Zealand. But I don't think anyone of our age wouldn't remember Hugo rushing in to get KFC, and there was a lot wrong about that ad, really, wasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Have a listen.
The cows and the sheep and the birds and the horses were moving and laughing and whistling and neighing, having lunch in the sun, while Hugo and I were having none. In the back seat we sat, getting thinner. The rumblings cried, give us Kentucky Fried, time for dinner. So Dad stopped the car.
And Hugo said, you go.
And I said, no, you go. And soon he was back with the pack. And then Dad hit the track. So we ate in the back, feeling better inside. A drive isn't funny with an empty tummy. Thank goodness for Kentucky Fried.
Right. So little fat kids going into KFC. And I think to correct that in the years following, I'm sure KFC employed Elle Macpherson again to eat a chicken leg and say how great it was. Fabulous, because there was such a big push about them being KFC not being good for you, so they thought they'd get a supermodel to sell
Well,
it.
of course, back then it wasn't even called KFC. I mean, they made that decision to go from Kentucky Fried Chicken to KFC because the concept of something being fried was not good for you. Yet they showed a couple of more Rubenesque kids in the back of the car.
Rubenesque, I love it.
And so they were very aware of it.
Yeah.
But the jingle sort of stuck with us, didn't it? I mean, it was just great seeing the car bouncing along with Mum and Dad in the front seat, and there's the kids. So,
and we've talked about speaking about fast food, right? McDonald's. You and I both worked at Macca's at Carlingford there on Pennant Hills Road, and we were talking about whether this was a jingle: 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. I don't know that it was a jingle. I don't know. Was it a jingle or just something you went in and said and got a free burger?
Yeah, you did, but it just stuck in your head, didn't it? And guaranteed, anyone listening to this today will know that whole 2 all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese. They will know what's on a Big Mac, even though the Big Mac is like half the size of it as it was in the 70s. But
when that came out, I remember the boss said, "Okay, well, I was on front counter, and he said you have to remember it because people are going to come in and say it and get a free burger, and they've got to get it right to say the free." And I went home and practiced saying it thousands of times. So if some little kid came in and said it and got it wrong, I go, "No, you got it wrong."
Oh, how many times did you say that though?
Never. No, even if they got it wrong, they got a free burger. But I remember it stressed me for a few days trying to remember it. And now, like you said, it's stuck in there. It's earworming.
Yeah. Look, talking about food and sort of stuff that's really good for you, like Macca's and KFC, there's a great ad for Holden. If you remember it, the whole football meat pies, Kangaroos, and Holden Cars.
Cars, yeah.
Look, it was all part. Was that part of that Mojo sort of
No,
period?
I think that was before Mojo.
That was before, was it?
Yeah, I think so. Because Mojo, I think, really came into its own in the early 80s. And I think that ad was 70s because for some reason, I'm picturing 70s Holdens.
Yeah. No, you're
the older Jays, maybe.
You're probably right. Because Mojo was that whole "you ought to be congratulated," all those very catchy sort of
and used the same guy for a lot of those ads, didn't they?
Where is that guy?
Where is that guy? Who was that guy? Because he did the one of my favorites was "How Do You Feel?" And there was a couple of them, and they were based around the cricket. And I think Mike Whitney starred in one of them. And I was not into cricket. I didn't get into cricket until Billy Birmingham, made it funny in the 80s and 90s. So these ads meant nothing to me. Just a bunch of blokes playing some game with a stick on a paddock, and at the end of it, they're all drinking beer. I'm a girl, right? I was not into cricket, but they stand the test of time. I feel like a Tui's or Two, again, really stood the test of time and made you want to pick up a can and rip the top off it.
Yeah, I remember. Was it Steve Rickson? I think he was a wicketkeeper for New South Wales. And Doug Walters, of all people, who lived relatively close to where you and I both grew up, and he was at the other end. And I think Steve Rickson hit one over the boundary. But you were right. It was Mike Whitney was in one. Just insert new set of faces.
Yeah, actually got a bit of the Steve Rickson one here. Have a listen.
How do you feel when you walk on the field knowing you're the last to play? How do you feel when you face a new ball and the winner's just 5 runs away? How do you feel when you hear the appeal and the umpire says no way? How do you feel on the very last ball and only a 6 will save the day? How do you feel when the ball leaves the field and there's a big hits on the way? How do you feel? How do you feel?
I feel like a two-ace. I feel like a two-ace. I feel like a two-ace or two. I feel like a two-ace. I feel like a two-ace. I feel like a two-ace drop through.
Oh, how good.
Oh, memories. I'm picturing him just, arms raised, put the ball over the boundary. It's one of those childhood sort of things. But then it's all made worthwhile because you're ripping the ring pull off a beer. And
Yeah, that's right. Not only is it a good day on the field, on the paddock.
oh, look, can we go back just a little bit?
Yeah.
And there was one that, there's a lot of things as far as your personal hygiene is concerned. Okay.
Yes.
And it was a very short jingle, and it all had to do with palm olive gold. Don't wait to be told.
You need palm olive gold. Yeah, nobody wanted to be told.
No one wanted to be told. So you need to go out, all those sort of things. And I'm thinking there was was it the lady in the rally car? And I don't know. There was a whole raft of them, but that's got to be, what was that, 50 or 60 years old? And that's...
Oh, definitely. And people, there was a thing that if you worked with somebody in the office who, was a bit smelly, you'd put a little bar of palm olive gold on there because the ad was so well known. You could do that and instantly the person knew, oh, gee, I might be a bit whiffy.
Don't wait to be told. You need palm olive gold.
You're telling me this now?
Oh. Well, I didn't do it. I'm just saying I know it happened.
I wondered what... I thought it was just someone being polite and thinking, we've got an extra cake of soap. Speaking of which, there was an ad with a guy in a top hat with, the whole "we want you," the whole American thing. And it was a deodorant called Uncle Sam.
Oh, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and he had the whole jingles. Look, we might have a listen to that if we can.
You need Uncle Sam. You need Uncle Sam. Let's get together with the stars right time. In Sydney or Melbourne, in Brisbane or Perth. Just play Uncle Sam, yeah, for all that you're worth. Perfect connection for fellas and girls. And under your arm is the top of the world.
Play it again,
And under your arm is the top of the world.
Northwood.
Oh, yeah. Sign me up now for a can of that stuff and I'll join the army while I'm going.
Yeah, look, that ticked a lot of sort of enlistment boxes, let alone, I don't know whatever happened to that guy that, he was 15 minutes of fame. But, look, whether it was deodorant or soaps or I'm sure there were probably things for, not that it was a jingle, but the Colgate Ring of Confidence, all those sort of things.
Oh, yeah. And Mrs. Marsh with her chalk. Do you remember? No, I don't think that was a jingle, but I just remember the ad.
This sounds vaguely like a whole other episode on TV advertisements and going back into the past. But that sexualization of TV ads and all, do you remember the Move Milk ads from back in the late 70s, early 80s?
That was so cool. Late 70s. I remember that. The girls on the beach and the Move flavored milk was not really a thing. Before that, it was quick, wasn't it, and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, to be able to buy milk already flavored, that was so cool.
And you'd just be lazing on the beach, and the guy'd be jumping into this mystical sort of stardust water, and it was all, it was very early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and they had all the swimwear ads, like whether it was Speedo or whatever, but it was sexualization, but we loved it. We lapped it up, and it was at a time when you could probably do it, and no one sort of really raised an eyebrow, right?
No, they didn't. No, like I said, in the 70s, it was, all bets were off. You could do any of that kind of stuff. But speaking about sexualization, do you remember in the 70s the ad for Harris Coffee and Tea? And the reason I raise it is because kids at school used to go, "Oh, are you related to that Harris Coffee?" "Oh, yeah, that's my great grandfather," and I'd tell people. But there was an iconic jingle that seemed to go on forever around Harris Coffee and Tea. Tell me if you remember this.
If you listen very carefully, I'll tell you a tale of coffee and tea and E.H. Harris and Company. In 1883, Harris clippers put to sea in search of coffee and tea, quality coffee and tea. They sped like hawks across the seas for rare Ceylon and China teas, then rode the roaring 40s till they found rich coffee in Brazil. Then down around the dreaded Horn, where ships were lost and legends born, laden with precious coffee and teas, they crashed their way through the angry seas. At last the friendly trade winds blew, the mighty Harris clippers flew homeward across the southern sea, down to a circular quay. They opened shop in Sydney Strand, and soon the word passed through the land that E.H. Harris and Company sold quality coffee and tea. Now times have changed and Sydney swings. It's a different kind of ship that brings cargoes for Harris across the sea, but there's never been a change in the quality. Since 1883, E.H. Harris and Company for quality coffee and tea. Harris Coffee and Tea, quality coffee and tea. Harris Coffee and Tea.
What an epic! Like I've just sailed across the Pacific Ocean.
Why DiCaprio wasn't in that, standing at the front of the ship, arms spread, saying, look, I don't know. But it was like a 60-second or a minute and a half ad. I'm sure it was supposed to inform and educate viewers, and really,
it was epic because the tea being transported around the colonies in the 1800s. I think that was what they were trying to relive.
Yeah, and found its way to supermarkets from there, of course, straight off the clippers in the 1800s to Woolies or Coles or Aldi or
7-Eleven.
Whoever.
These days.
That's how it worked. Now, there's one that I think just resonated with a lot of people. I don't know whether it was the ad itself and people being in a shower or not, but do you recall the Decore ad?
Oh my gosh, that was huge. Let's have a listen to it.
Decore, as I shampoo my hair, I really love new Decore. I love the feeling, nothing can beat it. Oh, now, yes, I really love it. So does the family. Come on, new Decore. See, yeah. New Decore, the family shampoo.
And again, like you said, right, it's great, but sexualizing, shampooing your hair becomes all of a sudden something a little bit naughty.
Yeah, look, I mean, from the good-looking guy with the six-pack, pretending he's got a microphone in his hand, it covered all body types, to be fair. But look, I don't know whether I wanted to be part of the audition process to be in that ad, to be honest.
Yes.
I mean, it's all well and good to mime the song, but I mean, if you were cut from that saying, "Oh, look, you don't make it," and then you had a look at the people in the ad, and I thought, what didn't I have?
There goes your confidence.
There goes your confidence right there. So,
Okay, now let's go back. This is something close to my heart. Talking about back in the day, I think it was the 70s, TAA came out with a campaign based on a song, Up, Up and Away. And the song was In My Beautiful Balloon, but they came up with Up, Up and Away with TAA, The Friendly Way.
That
And all the air hosties, and it's dear to me because my mum was a TAA
really?
air hostie in the 50s before she got married, because once you were married, you couldn't do it. They wouldn't
Is
let
that
you work.
right?
So she signed up. I think she was about 19 or 20. She did it for about a year. Then my dad proposed and she had to stop.
No.
But in those days, yeah, serious. They were very glamorous, the girls. I've got some amazing pictures of my mum in her TAA uniform looking very Hollywood, and very, very glam. But yeah, it was. And then that ad came along showing these beautiful girls. It was probably one of the few jingles featuring transport or an airline.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree too, as far as yeah.
Stop it.
But it's not the first time, because they've ripped that song directly from a great sort of hit to and just transpose it to TAA. And it's not the first time that had been done. And I know they aren't Australian, but there were so many more of those sort of things, because I remember Coca-Cola used to do a lot of that sort of thing. And they had there was a song, Like to Teach the World to Sing in Perfect Harmony. Well, that was an advertising jingle, believe it or not. And then it actually became a hit in its own right. And there were a few of those. There was another one called Jeans On in the late 70s.
Based on
David Dundas, yeah. David Dundas, yeah.
David Dundas,
and that was for a brand of jeans called Brutus Jeans, and the advertising campaign went so well that it became a song and a hit in its own right. So,
Brutus Jeans. Who came up with that idea?
Yeah, look, I don't know.
I'm going to throw on my Brutus
Once again,
jeans.
we're in Brutus jeans these days. But even if you remember, I'm sure so many people would have. I'm hating myself for saying this. That song, We've Only Just Begun, by the Carpenters. Okay, now believe it or not, the Carpenters were not the first people to sing that, and it had commercial beginnings. It was written by a guy called Paul Williams and Roger Nichols. And it was designed to better connect with young people on a TV ad back in 1969, and the Carpenters did it a couple of years later.
An ad for what?
It was part of a bank ad.
A bank ad?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know. So, and it was recorded by a guy called, I think his name was Smokey Robards. He was the first person.
Remember this stuff in your brain. You've got so much stuff going on up there, haven't you?
Yeah, not enough useful stuff. But people that did actually write jingles, believe it or not, Barry Manilow's written advertising jingles.
Oh, really?
He's done stuff for Band-Aid, and he's done a whole lot of stuff. And also Randy Newman, the guy, short people he's done them, and You've Got a Friend. He done a lot of stuff with like Dr. Pepper, all that sort of thing. So really big name people have had a big impact as far as jingles are concerned.
Well, I guess if you're trying to advertise a product, why reinvent the wheel? If you can drag out a song that's already a big hit and repurpose that song to your product, makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, and along those lines, let's have a listen to this one and tell me if you remember it.
Banana boat.
Front side protection.
Banana boat.
It's 30 plus.
Banana boat.
It lasts for hours and hours and hours.
Banana boat. Banana boat. Psycho.
Did you ever use banana boat?
Do I remember it? Yeah.
And that had been repurposed from the Muppet song.
That's right.
Manamana.
Yeah. That's it.
So, and it caught on. I don't know whether it was running sequentially with that whole thing or not, or whether they had to wait for copyright clearance or
whatever.
I don't know. Yeah. But once again, I mean, that's got to be 40 years old.
Once again, on the beach. Hey, going back to sport, we talked earlier about how do you feel and stuff, but in that vein, how big was Come On Aussie, Come On for the World Series cricket? Let's have a bit listen to that.
You've been training all the winter, and there's not a team that's fitter, and that's the way it's got to be. 'Cause you're up against the best you know. This is super test, you know. And you've got to beat the best the world has seen. Lily's pounding down like a machine. machine. Pascoe's making divots in the green. Marsh is taking wickets, Hooks he's clearing pickets, and the Chapel's eyes have got that killer gleam. Mr. Walker's playing havoc with the bats. Redpath, it's good to see you back. Lady's making runs, Dougie's chewing gum, and Gilmore's wielding willow like an axe. Come on, Aussie, come on, come on. Come on, Aussie, come on, come on. Come on, Aussie, come on, come on. Come on, Aussie, come on.
I mean, people were singing that. The crowds were singing that at actual cricket games, weren't they? They were yelling that out.
And that was after they needed something big because the whole ACB, Australian Cricket Board, and the establishment and getting all those players to come across to World Series cricket, that was a masterstroke.
Yeah, that was another mojo, wasn't it? Was it or not?
I'll take your word on that one, but whoever it was,
Yeah.
they deserve a pat on the back because all those world-class players that had come across to World Series cricket were playing at really small, well, not small grounds, but they couldn't play at the MCG or the SCG, so they were playing at Princes Park in Melbourne and all these much smaller grounds. And because the crowds were coming in to see, the likes of Viv Richards and Ian and Greg Chappell and all these world-class players, they needed something to hang their hat on. And, of course, come on, Aussie, come on.
Oh, how big. And let's not, what you're talking about Melbourne, let's not forget about our friends down south of the border with Mike Brady promoting Channel 7's coverage of the VFL with this great classic. Again, right, you can feel that big crowd surge in that song. It just really helps to get you behind the game, doesn't it?
Did the Cazaly family actually get any residuals from that? I mean, probably like the Harris family in the coffee.
Was there a Cazaly family?
Well, I think...
See, I told you I don't know anything about cricket.
Well, you'd think Cazaly being an AFL player...
Right, okay. Oh, gosh.
It was...
Oh, my gosh.
I'm not sure whether he was a player in the 30s or 40s, but it was an iconic song, and it just stood. And you felt that whole stadium sort of uplifting. It was... And it... Once again, It was an advertising campaign that went on to become number one on the Australian charts. It didn't matter whether you followed football or not.
Yes, it did.
It was huge. It just gave you this euphoria.
Yep.
And this uplifting of your spirit. And, whether you knew whether Cazaly was a real player or not.
Oh, my gosh. Cricketer.
Or, he could have been a water polo player for all I knew.
Yeah, it could have been a synchronised swimmer.
Well, I'm waiting for that chance just to, But let's wind right back now. And I know we were talking about this earlier, and there's a bit of a link with AC/DC and a particular advertising campaign that I know you picked up on as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to play it for you first, and then I'm going to play the AC/DC version that features the same wording. Let's have a listen to the first one.
Louie the Fly, I'm Louie the Fly, straight from rubbish tip to you, spreading disease with the greatest of ease, straight from rubbish tip to you. I'm bad and mean and mighty unclean, afraid of no one except the man with the can of Mortine.
Well, I get it, mean and very unclean. I want to know.
Now tell me those Louie the Fly people did not rip those lyrics off AC/DC. It was around about the same time.
Well, someone ripped the lyrics off from someone. I'm not quite sure who. But it worked for
both of them.
for Australians because it worked for both of them, and I'm sure someone is getting residual payments from that as well. There's a lot of payments going on.
That's that we're not a part
your
of.
way or my way, isn't it? Yeah. But I'm sure, look, I mean, we had that situation, didn't we, where a few years ago, was it the was it the Oz Crawl Men at Work whole fiasco with the Kookaburra sits in the old gum tree lyrics being used in something, and yet here's AC/DC using essentially like a Louie the Fly thing.
Comparing Bon Scott to a fly.
Yeah, look, I'm going to hop in my Amoco in my machine, nice clean petrol, positive power, you know what I mean? And of course, we don't drink and drive, so Mr. Lindeman's wine cask, you know, Mr. Lindeman makes you happy with his wine cask and all.
Yes,
I don't know. I think I'll do one of those two, and then we can catch up. We catch up next week.
Well, I'm going to go down to KFC with Hugo.
Well, if you go and I go, we'll be back. Yeah, okay, we're going. I'll see you later.
See ya.
The views and opinions expressed on the Big 60 are personal and reflect those of the hosts and guests. They do not represent the views or positions of any affiliated organisations or companies. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for guidance on any personal matters.
Oh, and before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?